Hello, everybody. I am doing a live commentary on my process of doing Jar Binks in the style of a Muppet, or more specifically, Muppet Baby. So, right here I'm sculpting, of course, but normally I wouldn't start with a sphere like I did, but this is just something I've not really done before, something like a cartoonish alien character before. I normally do human subjects. So this entire sculpt is more of a trial and error kind of thing, and I really kind of rushed through this, more so than I normally would in a sculpt, because I just didn't add the proper detail that I should have with the original sculpt, but I add that detail in the retopology phase. But you'll see here that this time lapse is actually going by pretty quickly, but I was not really expecting that to be this quick. But again, this time lapse is pretty long, so I shortened it down to what I think to be pretty reasonable. But anyways, I'm doing the eyes here, and Jar Jar and all the other Gungans, they have, their eyes sit on these stalks, but I decided to do it this fashion where the eyes sit closer to the face. The reason being is that kind of looks more like a Muppet. And again, this is supposed to be Jar Jar in the style of a Muppet character. And right here, I also play around with the expression of the eyelids to see, what really fits the best. Trying not to make his eyes look intense, really, but I found that kind of hard not to do. So right here, I'm just shaping the eyelids. Later on, we'll get to it when we get to it, but of course, modeling around a sphere for the eyeball, giving the eyelid some thickness. So here I do the nostrils, which I probably should not really have worried about this early on in the sculpt, where there's still a lot of shaping to do. And another kind of challenge I came across with this head is making it look less like a crocodile or an alligator, and more of a Gungan, but I do eventually get to that. And of course the ears. The ears are a very important part of a Gungan. And I use the skin modifier here to shape the ears into the shape I really want them to be in. So this sculpt is for an art competition hosted by this website called International Talk Like Jar Jar Binks Day, and it is the Gungan Babies art contest. And I thought this would be a really good art contest to really practice my skills. Right here, I want to get into this. This is where I start really getting the head into into a shape that would fit more of a Muppet style. But here, I also tried to use the skin modifier in a way that I normally don't use it in. And I usually use the skin modifier to make a body base mesh. However, I don't make it one piece, because I found that the skin modifier can work in very unpredictable ways. So what I normally do is that I break up the body into different parts and then make a skin modifier mesh out those parts. And then I gave up on the skin modifier because I wasn't happy with it, and I'm trying to use metaballs right now, which is something I've never done before, using metaballs to create a base mesh. And after the experience of using metaballs, I probably wouldn't personally use metaballs, at least entirely. I'd probably use a healthy mix of both the skin modifier and metaballs in the future. But yeah, throughout this entire sculpting process, I am just never happy with the body, and that becomes very apparent with the final render, which you will see when we get to that part. So right here, just smoothing out the body. But anyways, I wanted to get into why I decided to go with this contest, other than just for the experience of creating a character model. And that's because I do admire Jar Jar as a character, and I really, as somebody that's very passionate about both Star Wars and 3D animation and just 3D graphics in general, Jar Jar is a character that I've, it would be silly to say that they didn't take him over the top, but I just look past that really, and I still enjoy the character. In fact, Jar Jar is one of my favorite characters in the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars is actually my favorite piece of media to come out of Star Wars, so you could argue that Jar Jar is one of my favorite Star Wars characters. But yeah, like I said, I just really admire the work that went into Jar Jar. But other than that, I'll go back into the process. Here I'm starting work with the hands, which pretty much every artist will know that the hands are probably one of the most complicated things to pull off, whether you're doing 2D or 3D art. And here I use the snake hook, and this is the first time I've ever used the snake hook brush. You'll notice that my sculpting style, I use the grab brush as my primary brush. I just like the volumes that I get out of the grab brush mostly. It just works well for me. But this is my first time ever using the snake hook brush, and while it's fine. I just, of course, it was very effective for what I was trying to do, but the hands just came out cursed, and typically I even make a base mesh for the hand with the fingers when I am doing a model, and this time I didn't do it. One of my biggest regrets with this model is just not creating a more detailed base mesh. I think if I did that, then this model would have come out a lot better. I still think I'm still happy with the result I got out of it, but it could have just been so much better. And part of the reason why is because I basically just rushed through this model, and I really shouldn't have. But since this was, I think I was subconsciously worried about the time constraint that I had, even though I finished this model a full 9 days before the competition ended, so I had plenty of time. Here, of course, I'm working on the ears. This turned out to be a bit more complicated than I originally thought it would be. Trying to smooth the ears in with, the head, and I think a big issue is that they're just, the ears aren't really in a relaxed pose. They're kind of out there, which can be fixed later on with an armature, but I think that added kind of a strange shape to the ears. And again, the ears is something, like I said, I wish I went in with a more detailed base mesh, but And the ears are definitely included in that. I think I could have gone way more detailed in on the ears. Here we really start to get more of a Jar Jar look to it. And here I am basically gluing all the pieces together, and this is where I start to retopologize. Now, I completely understand that this is not the preferred way of retopology, but I felt like with this model, even when I was sculpting it, I realized that I did not have enough detail in my sculpt to really like justify using the shrink wrap modifier and go that route. So I did a far more manual retopology process, and with the retopology is where I really start to add in the details. And again, I'm also modeling with the subdivision surface modifier, which again is not very recommended, at least not by a lot of people, including myself, because you really don't get a good idea of what your model really truly looks like until it's all kind of put together with the subdivision modifier. And really, I feel like the only part of the retopology process I got right is the mouth, which I'm working on right now in the video. We'll get to the eyes later, but the eyes again was kind of a place where I could have spent more time with the retopology process, get a bit more of a natural topology flow, but I ended up not posing the eyelids, which is actually fine for a Muppet model because their eyelids don't really move if you really think about it. So here, still working on the mouth, going up the face. Again, this whole retopology process was just trial and error. In fact, this is actually one of the I don't think this is the first time I've actually done retopology. Like I know the proper way of doing retopology, but of course I don't do it in this. And I also want to say that my whole experience with sculpting this model and getting it all together was just, I would do something one way and then realize in my head that there was a much easier way of doing that thing, which is probably a natural process of just doing art, where you figure out you've just been doing something kind of the wrong way. I'm sure more experienced people don't really catch themselves in that issue. I'm also smoothing out the lips, where Jar Jar kind of has this, or all Gungans have this crest on their lip, and I really wanted to make that apparent, but it smooths out later on, if that makes sense. Here, this turned out to be this part right here, getting behind the eyelids, turned out to be a pretty challenging part for me because I just didn't really know exactly the shape I needed to go for. It was just kind of, I thought it would be that part, but okay, no, here it is. So, yeah, just pulling back, like the part of the eyelid. This turned out to be pretty difficult. I just didn't really know a good way to approach it in terms of topology. And this is when I should have kind of worked on the eyes separately and then kind of bridged edge loops between the mouth and the eyes for the topology, I think. Again, this really was just a process of trial and error and being like, oh, well, there was definitely a far easier way of doing that, but I just didn't go with that approach. I think the other thing that made it difficult is that the ears kind of, the root of the ears are really close to where the eyes, the root of the eyes too, in that area. They just kind of, just very close together. So in the back of the head, or the top back of the head, I just have really funky topology. Probably works out fine because, you know, the back or the top of the head is not really a place that you are going to animate too much, but I also didn't worry about the topology too much in this model because I knew that I wasn't really going to animate it. I was just going to do a still picture of it. Even if you are going to do that, you still want to do better topology than I did, because in the future you might want to reuse the model. I'm probably not going to reuse this model ever. If I decide that I need a Jar Muppet baby, I am going to create a new one entirely. The ears were a very interesting thing to retopologize, because it was kind of easier than the rest of everything else, which might sound funny because I spend a considerable amount of time on the ears, retopologizing the ears, but it was actually pretty simple. One thing that I do quite a bit when I'm working on the ears is that I change the transform type from global to view axis, which comes in really handy because the ears are at an angle, kind of like a very unnatural angle, and I was doing it right there. I might do it some more here again so you can see exactly what I'm doing, but yeah, the view axis really helped out with the ears, again, because the ears are just at such an awkward angle that doesn't really line up with the global X or Y axis. So here I'm about to finish up the ears. And again, the topology on the bottom of the ears is really funky. I think it's because I had either an even or an odd number of faces at the bottom, and I couldn't really make a clean topology in a reasonable amount of time. Here we start to get to the body, which later on in the model I completely neglect just because, again, I was just never truly happy with how the body came out. It's just kind of a mess. The hands become very cursed in terms of both shape and topology. It's probably I tried pulling off some tricks that just did not work out in the end, and you'll see that here in a minute when we get to the hands. So here I make a cavity so that I can extrude the arm out, and again, this is not how I would normally do arms. I thought this would be okay considering that this is far more of a cutesy, cartoony character, but that's just definitely not the way I would normally make shoulder joints. You just should not do shoulder joints that way ever. Well, I mean, not ever, because they're fine, but definitely not for a detailed model, in my opinion. Same thing here with the legs. The legs are just kind of cursed. Not the best topology. And I don't even bother applying an armature to the legs later on. So really working on the feet here was just turned out to be a waste of time. Same thing with the arms and the hands, really, because I just do a profile shot of the head, not a profile shot, but just a head shot of Jar Jar for the final render, and it wasn't a waste of time, I should say, because the reason I went with a headshot is because I just was not happy with how anything turned out below the neck of the model. So, yeah, toes, getting that, filling in the bottom of the feet, which, again, curse topology. This is really one of the big reasons why you really need to plan out your topology. And this might be where an automatic retopology tool might come in really handy, especially if you really should study proper topology so you know how to do it manually. But if I actually cared about the way the body turned out in the sculpt phase, I might have used I would have considered using maybe an automatic retopology tool. This is where we really start to get into the cursed territory here with the fingers, and this I struggle quite a bit, especially with the middle finger here, because the middle finger has more detail than the fingers, the index finger and the pinky finger, and this is something I try to fix right here with the knife tool, where I try to convert two quads to one quad, but then I get really confused, and it does not turn out very good at all. The topology on this hand would be totally unusable in terms of animation purposes, or just posing. Like, there's just no way. So, like, it just makes me wonder why I spent so much time on it, trying to retopologize the hands, because again, this topology is just totally useless. Like, you really can't do anything with it. So here I consider the topology process finished. This is where I start to UV unwrap the model and make a texture for it. And again, I run into some problems where I think I have to unwrap the model several times because right here I realize that there are some painting errors, and I think, well, maybe I should apply the subdivision surface modifier. But oh yeah, this part's actually crazy. Again, this is where I make things a little bit too hard on myself, where I don't really consider that there's an easier way of doing something. And something very very aggravating happens here. So I'm masking a place to do the lips, and then I accidentally unselect all those pieces, and there's no way to get that reselection back. So again, I'm reselecting the part of the lip that I want to paint. And again, I'm trying to go with I originally tried to go with like a two-toned Jar Jar model, which I'll elaborate on it here again in a minute, but this is where I reapply a mirror modifier, because I realize using a mirror modifier in the painting process would make things a lot easier. So I basically just redo the mirror modifier. The mirror modifier makes everything easier. So anyways, I try to I tried to go with a two-toned Jar Jar early on, but it just didn't look right to me. And I didn't really know how to pull it off in a good way. Like, where the paint should be in certain parts, and it just didn't look good. It just looks like Jar Jar fell in a puddle of mud or something, so I just scrapped the two-toned. I didn't have a good plan at all to go around how I was going to do it, so I just decided to go with a single tone, and right here is where I start to get into the Muppet mouth. However, I approach the mouth like 3 different times, as you will see here. Like right here, I completely unwrap the model again, because I realize if the mouth is the only part I'm going to paint, then the mouth should have, the most space on the UV map. So this is what I do. I paint it. That also just gets so much more detail in where it's needed. Here is where I start work on the tongue, and an issue I have, which you will see, is that I pack the image in with the blend file, but that causes an issue where I basically have to redo this paint all over, which was very annoying. Here I start to work on the eyeball and painting the eyeball. Now I decided to go with a Kermit eye for this. Reason being is that both Kermit and Jar Jar are amphibians, so I thought giving Jar Jar, the amphibian eye would be very fitting. The eye again, I have some weird unpacking, or not unpacking, but packing with the blend file where it just, like, I know what happened, I know what went wrong, I know why things happened, but it was just very unintuitive the way it's set up in Blender. So later on I end up just saving the files on disk, the image files. Here, getting to the final render phase, I apply a noise texture on the displacement channel of the shader to give it kind of a felt look to it, like a puppet. And I mess around again, more with the eye material as well. Here I start to sculpt, shaping the eye a little bit more for it to look good. Soon, in fact, right now, is where I start applying an armature, and the jaw, I just did not place the jaw in a good place for the longest time, and I wish I realized that, where the jaw just does not deform correctly until I remove that bone again. As you can see, I didn't even bother putting bones in the hands, in the fingers, or in the legs, because I just decided that those areas were just a lost cause. And here we get into the weight painting, which I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me. Weight painting is the most painful process when it comes to 3D character creation, and I have a lot of issues with weight painting here. Just not very fun. But what's weird is that I realize later on that my bone hierarchy is wrong, where the jaw and the ear bones are connected to the neck bone instead of the head bone. I fixed that right there. And then I reapply with automatic weights. The automatic weights just don't seem to be working with this model very well. A lot of the times in Blender, when you apply automatic weights, it does a decent job of doing automatically painting the weights itself. Of course, there is some fine tuning you typically have to do, but oh yeah, and this is when I realized that my texture just didn't save after I packed it into the blend file, which was really awesome. So I have to repaint. Which actually this part's easier now that I can actually see what I'm doing. I can see the areas that I'm painting since I applied an armature. And again, having to do the tongue, but I actually like the new texture just because it was so much easier to see what I was doing. And I can't think of what makes me think right here where I need to readjust the jawbone, and this creates such a better hinge where you don't have this massive gap at the back of the mouth. So that's just completely mitigated right here. And the mouth just turns out so much better here. I have quite a bit of issue with how to connect the bottom of the jaw to the body in terms of weight painting. But I think I just kind of ignore it. Right here, this is where I start to get into the actual posing. Oh no, I still do a little bit of painting right here to try to fix up the bottom of the neck. Yeah. The other issue is that I just don't have that much experience in white painting. I have some, but not a whole lot. But again, weight painting is just like the most annoying process, I think, personally, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. Right here, I struggle with trying to find a good lighting setup that doesn't make Jar Jar look creepy. So I go with a 3-point light, and I also figure out that I should change the background color from an ominous black to kind of like a nice green that kind of complements his skin tone. And right here is when I start to optimize the renderer. Essentially, I turn caustics off and just a lot of different things. And I also decide later on to stop the render here, and I open paint.net to make basically a height map of the mouth, so the tongue kind of sticks out more a little bit from the bottom of the mouth. And the effect isn't really that strong, but whatever. I mean, it's fine. Making an actual model for the tongue probably would have been the best thing to do. But I just decided to go with a displacement, and that takes a bit of fine-tuning to do. Yeah. Here we go. Here is where I think I mess with the eye shader to make it a bit more glossy, to make the eyes kind of stick out just a little bit more, to make everything look less flat. The lighting definitely could be a bit better because the lighting is kind of dull, but I don't know, it works out. Again, this whole project was very much a learning process of me figuring out, what looks good. Lighting could be so much better, but oh well. Oh, one more thing I want to say. Please excuse the Activate Windows watermark. What happened is that I had Windows 7 on this computer, and I decided that it just needed a completely clean reinstall of an OS, because I had the same install since 2014, So I go with a clean install, but I realize that in the process of doing that, I lost my product key, and this computer's already pretty old, so I don't know if I want to spend that much money, $100 on activating Windows when I can basically just use it already. But I have to deal with the watermark that I rarely notice. So here I start to clean up. Oh, okay, end of video. Right there, I cleaned up the blend file. I made sure all of the project files were saved in case I ever want to come back to this model for whatever reason. I don't think I will, but you know, it's nice to save things. Maybe look back in the future on the model, see how I've grown. Yeah, I do want to talk about a little bit of what I would do differently if I were to start this over. I probably would just sculpt the model and into the pose instead of sculpting sculpting, you know, in T pose and then planning on later on giving it an armature, because if this is just a one shot, you know, I'm only going to make one render of it. You might as well just sculpt it into the pose that you're going to. But again, sometimes that might not be the best practice, because you never know when you might want to reuse a model that you created a while ago. I don't know when I would need a Jar Muppet baby again, but you know, who knows? It might come up someday. I definitely should have spent more time on the sculpting process. Get a more detailed base mesh. Use a healthy mix of skin modifier and maybe metaballs. Make you know, separate objects instead of trying to make one object, like a skin modifier off of just one object. Because again, the skin modifier has some very weird quirks to it when you start to make very detailed shapes with the skin modifier. What else? Retopology could have been better. Do not try to use this topology as a reference. If you are making a model, just don't. I had no plan or rhyming to any of the topology except for the mouth when I was retopologizing this mesh. And again, you know, if you're going to retopologize the mesh, make sure you got all the details in that you actually want. Don't settle for, you know, I'll just make a basic shape with sculpting and then I'll add in the details with the topology like I did in this model. Just don't do that. Well, this video is going on long enough. I'll stop it here. I just wanted to share my thoughts with the time lapse. So yeah, expect more sculpting time lapses in the future. Expect more just more artsy content, time lapses. I'll do more characters. I'll do more like settings, and maybe I'll even do some tutorials later on if I feel like that there's any valuable information I can add to the already endless sea of Blender tutorials. I'm also getting into Godot engine. It's I really like it. Yeah. I know that's very you know, I've run out of words, so I just better stop this video. So thank you for watching. I hope you like my Jar Muppet baby, and yeah, See you later.